Porscia Lam, thanks for joining us here today at Yellow Shelf.
Thank you so much for having me, Joanna. I'm looking forward to chatting.
It's a pleasure. This is a debut memoir that is about to be released. So we're doing a conversation really focusing on pre-sales, and the book will be out, but certainly people can order the book. Congratulations. The book is called The Unlocking an Autism Story. Tell us all about your book, Porscia. What do we need to know?
My book is a memoir. It is about my experiences raising my son, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2 in August 2020. So this was right in the heart of that first year of the pandemic. And we live in Melbourne. So over the course of 2 years, it also became the world's most locked down city.
Yes.
And you can probably hear from that the book starts out quite bleak. I do revisit some of the experiences which will be relatable for many Melburnians and probably a bit traumatic as well. But for those who were lucky enough to not live through a lockdown, the voyeuristic side might be interested in sort of what it was like to live through these 2 years in Melbourne. But then we also had this extra layer of complexity in that my husband and I were parents to a 1-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. And our son had really challenging and complex behaviours. Many parents who get that diagnosis in the first year will say that the first year is really difficult because the behaviours are obviously challenging. That's what's driven you to seek the diagnosis. But then you're experimenting, you're trying different strategies, trying to help your child. And not many of us get it right the first time. It's a real journey of trial and error. And you can make things a bit worse before they get better. And we certainly had our share of that experience. And then the hardest thing probably was on top of that, because it was locked down and because we were new to this diagnosis, we had no established therapies and no one was taking on new clients. And so we were just, my husband and I, our priority was really just to try and keep the children safe from one another, and that was our goal on a daily basis. So it really tested my fortitude. But the story, moves on from that point, and I don't leave readers wallowing in my misery. There was a brief break between lockdowns. Between lockdown 2 and lockdown 3, we had 3 months off. And this whole time I'd been ringing up clinics, and even though there's no one answering the phone, I'm leaving messages, I'm joining waiting lists. And finally, one clinic called me back. It was an early intervention clinic offering ABA therapy. And we did an intake meeting online. And then as soon as the lockdown lifted, we got onboarded. Someone came in and assessed my son, Harry, in person. And then we became existing clients. So we were able to use the lockdown exemptions and do the therapy. And in my book, I sort of examine some of the decisions we made around what kind of early intervention to pursue, because there are a lot of options out there. And we chose ABA therapy because we were really struggling with therapies where we would see a therapist for 45 minutes once a week or once every 2 weeks, and we weren't getting anywhere. Like, it wasn't making a dent in any of the challenges in his behavior. Whereas ABA therapy is done quite intensively in the early intervention stages. It's come 20 to 40 hours a week. And we thought, well, we'll give this a go, and hopefully it sort of has an impact. I think one of the things about ABA when you first start Googling it is that it's got quite a controversial past as well. And a lot of that was tied to the early forms of ABA, which was developed in the 60s and 70s, a very different time to now. Attitudes about autism and disability have changed so much, and even parenting has changed so much. So I talk about it in the book, and I won't talk about it here, but we got ourselves comfortable with sort of the modern approach of ABA, which had a lot of data behind it, and we gave it a go. And that's sort of the turning point of the book.
Yeah. And tell us, I'm really curious about, I mean, all this has happened in a really short period of time, post lockdown, post pandemic around the world. What inspired you to write as an author? Because, I will share, you're from the world of corporate, You're a very successful, corporate woman. You write, you put your passion into your child like anyone would do their best to. But then what actually inspired you to write the book?
I think partly what inspired me to write the book was when I was first researching early intervention options and ABA in particular, there was a lot of evidence around it. There was a lot of data-backed articles and commentary about it, but I didn't get a lot of insight from a parent's perspective or from the end user, the family's perspective. And I've written a book which I hope can fill a bit of that gap. And I hope there are moments in the book where I make the reader feel like they're sitting in my living room and having the opportunity to watch this therapy unfold. The therapy 20 to 40 hours a week. We started at 15, and at our peak, we were doing about 23 hours a week. But I remember the question in my head was, what are you going to do to my son for 20 to 40 hours a week? How does that time pass? And I sort of had my fears. I thought maybe he'll be locked in a room just head to head with a therapist the whole time. And, they'll try and program him like a robot, and it might be this really soulless experience. But actually what unfolded in our household was play-based. It was fun, and it was built all around his special interests. So he was really into the Incredible Hulk and Harry Potter and Toy Story at one point. And so all of that was drawn into his therapy. And if you happened to drop by our house when therapy was running, you would see him whizzing around on a broomstick, and then his therapist would come whizzing around on a broomstick after him. And it was all, it was high energy and engaging. But if you watch closely, they were also using that to teach him skills. And the skills that we were talking about were, they were really functional skills that every child that age needs. It's like allowing mum and dad to put sunscreen on him.
Yes.
Putting on shoes. And that was one of the big issues we had. During the lockdown, he stopped wearing shoes, and he didn't wear it for 9 months.
Yeah.
And so the one thing we could do, which was go for 1 hour of exercise each day, we couldn't even do that with Harry. We had to carry him around. And the ABA therapy reintroduced him to wearing shoes through this desensitization approach, like little increments. He had to touch the shoe and then put his foot in the shoe and take one step, and then the next day walk out the back door. And it was just tiny little increments that he thought was achievable. And at the end of that, he wore shoes, and he wears shoes today, and it gives him access to things that he loves, like climbing and chasing magpies and, running around after his friends. And it gave him access to all the joys of childhood. So for me, writing the book was partly a way to honor the therapy and the therapists and the incredible work that they did, and also provide insights to other parents in our position who find themselves sort of trying to navigate early intervention and trying to understand what ABA therapy is and what it looks like. Hopefully it fills that bit of the gap. But I also really hope it connects to readers who aren't necessarily directly engaged with the autism community already, just general readers who want a compelling story. And this is a full story. There's a narrative arc, and there are characters, and there's tension, and there's resolution. And I hope, if general readers read this story, it sort of helps connect the autism community with the broader community and fosters understanding and compassion.
Yeah. And look, like you said, this book is for everyone. And when I was looking at the book, I thought of grandparents as well, people who just want a little bit of insight into the journey and the family in those early days. Yeah, it's congratulations. How's the family doing? The journey is ongoing, but
It's great. So a lot of this story, there's a goal at the start of the story, which I'm kind of too scared to even articulate it fully. And it was this goal of trying to get Harry school ready.
yes.
Because at the start of the book, that looks like such an unlikely thing to happen. He was absolutely stricken by his separation anxiety and this layer of dysfunction that kind of really shackled his ability to just be a happy child. And then through the therapy, we built the skills that he needed to, interact with other children and bring the best of himself to a school and educational setting. And, I'm really happy to report that this year he went off to school, he started prep, and he wore shoes, which was incredible because
Yay.
if he hadn't learned to do that, I don't know what we would have done.
Yeah.
And he didn't need an aid, and he's, fully, really well
Yeah.
adapted. And when I go pick him up at the end of the school day, he's not in a hurry to leave the school grounds. He
Yeah.
wants to hang around and play in the playground and chase his friends.
Mm.
So the family's doing really well. It's been a really positive experience. The school experience has not been met with any resistance at all. We still have challenges, like in the household, we still deal with a lot of inflexible and rigid behaviour, sometimes quite controlling behaviour. But Harry is a happy kid, and that was our priority, to give him the opportunities that he should have at his age, and be able to participate in school. So we've had, a really positive outcome from it all.
That's wonderful to hear. And my final question's about connecting with you. You've got an amazing website. The book will be officially released sort of late January, February, but pre-orders, there will be a lot of curiosity around your book. What's the best way to connect with you on socials, or how do we get curious?
Yes, so I have a website, porcialam.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. And you're right. The book is published by the Kind Press in February next year, but it is available for pre-orders now. And Booktopia have very generously been extremely supportive of this title. If you pre-order through Booktopia now, there's a code, Autism 2025. It gives you a 15% discount off the pre-order price. So if it is a book that you're interested in, I highly recommend popping online to Booktopia and having a look there.
Fabulous. Well, I'll put that in the show notes to make it really easy for anyone listening, anyone curious. And like you said, anyone, not just anyone who's impacted, but anyone who just wants to understand a journey story in this space. Portia, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Joanna.
Cheers.
Cheers.